So, working for King County Medic 1 as an air support unit paramedic, Heiko Stopsack will be speaking about cultivating a first aid component into avalanche rescue avalanche rescue training guided by an evidence and data-driven research. In addition to working as a paramedic for 36 years, Heiko is also the director and lead instructor of Mount Hood Backcountry Ski and Avalanche Institute. So let's welcome Heiko.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks to NWAC and Scott and Sherry and everybody for allowing me to share this idea or notion that I have about improving survivability in avalanche terrain. Again, like I said, it's a notion, it's an idea that's been rattling around in my brain for the past 2 or 3 years, and I want to give some credit where credit's due. Some of you may know Kip Rand. I never got to know this gentleman, but he was a former director of the Willow Avalanche Center. And when I read his accident report, it was about the same time this notion about improving survivability came in my head. So I just want to dedicate this presentation today to his memory, and thank you. So despite our due diligence at times, we've prepared with our avalanche forecast, we've made sure we have our airbag, we have all the gear, we have all the stuff that we have. Accidents will happen. Sometimes maybe we didn't do our due diligence. And so in this terrain, performing life-saving care is vital upon your companions, the rescuers, and others in that area. So that's what I want to talk about. How can we improve this victim's survivability in terrain and environments like this? Because knowing that doing resuscitation for the last 36 years in the streets of King County, that's not the best place to do it. We all would love to have our medical emergency in a hospital. But on a mountainside, doing compressions, first aid care is limited, challenging, and pretty dang hard. So, which leads me to the question, can we improve avalanche victim survivability with better medical training? My notion tells me that we can. And by an enhanced avalanche rescue curriculum, which focuses on high-performance CPR, traumatic injuries, and hypothermia prevention. Those 3 core things, as a recreational user or someone just happens to come by or your companion, will mitigate the tragedy that has occurred. So, can we train in a safe but austere environment in our training courses as avalanche professionals to give our students the feel and the realistic feel of providing care or doing CPR for an avalanche victim? And I think that's a really important part. And again, I think we did. I have some results later that I can show you that that was challenging for the students, that affected their decision making, which is ultimately what we want to do in this business, right? Before you leave the door, what's your mindset? What's your decision making? What's your risk tolerance? And I'd like to propose a regional alerting system, and I'll get into that later with some more demonstrations. Again, this notion was rattling around in my head for a few years, and then about Christmas, I was stuck in a bar in Germany by myself on Christmas because my wife is sick upstairs. So I'm reading an Avalanche magazine, and Steve Christie talks about in ISSW, an abstract paper, that we should do more as avalanche professionals to encourage more realistic training, more preparation for these emergencies in our courses. So that inspired me to pursue this even further. So over the years, we've attacked avalanche education and surviving an avalanche training, like the attack on Normandy, right? We got our airbags, we have the avalanche bulletin, we take a level 1, we take a companion rescue course, and we've done a great job. So what's the next step? What is that next factor that maybe we can bump the numbers of survivors by 5%? We're doing a great job, but I feel that on the medical side of things, we might be ignoring the chain of survival. In this one up here, what you can see, and I apologize in the back if you guys can't see this very well, it's a pretty long and narrow room, but this is the American Heart Association or the city chain of survival. Call 911, get citizens to do CPR, defibrillator shows up, medic unit shows up, takes you to the hospital, hospitals take care of you. That works well. But I think if we look at we focus on the the recreational users in avalanche terrain, because they are our key people to change outcomes. Because there's not a fire station around the corner in avalanche terrain, who are going to rely on to come and help us? It's our companions. We rely too heavily on helicopters. Someone's going to come out and get you. That's not always the case, right? Rescues take a long time in the backcountry, so it's going to be the recreationalists that are going to save the day. This is the algorithm flow chart for medical professionals in the hospital. Are you going to remember this in the backcountry? Right? Right? Who wants to take the potassium level of a patient? No, we don't. When the accident happens, you're going to be focused on getting that victim out, clearing the airway, doing compressions, and saving their life. And the recreational user is the strongest link in the chain of survival. But I actually think that's not true. I think you're the anchor in the chain of survival. And why I can kind of justify this or back this theory up, because in King County and around the United States, we were plateauing with traditional CPR in the late 90s, early 2000s. And yes, we were putting people over barrels, riding them on horses, that's the old style CPR. Despite having advanced gear, advanced medicines, we had the best drugs around, we had a defibrillator on every corner of every city and every fire station, and we were hovering at 37%. And we asked ourselves, why were we just staying there despite all this fancy gear? Well, we were kind of forgetting the fundamentals. And that's what I want to bring us back here tonight, is that we are let's focus on the fundamentals out in the backcountry. Good CPR, hypothermia, stop the bleeding, will prevent further injury and harm and increase survivability. And once we focused on the basics and we made some changes where we minimized interruptions during CPR, we focused a little bit more on our airway. We really did high performance CPR, much like a NASCAR pit crew. We attacked that cardiac arrest patient. And last year, we had a 60% increase, or excuse me, a 60% survival of witnessed cardiac arrest in King County. So that's a big number, yeah, thank you. But that only happens when someone sees you go down and goes into cardiac arrest, which hopefully we're skiing with somebody or we're climbing with somebody and our companions will save the day. So I like to kind of use that model, is that someone saw you get buried, they're going to rescue you fast. And so let's apply this model to avalanche terrain. And I think we can do it. So that leads me to this question. Can we get similar results in the backcountry? It's going to take a team effort. So part of this is like, okay, does this really work? Will it work? And what are some of the risks that we have in the backcountry? It's a very, being second on today and following Pascal was a little bit intimidating, because this is the educational gold standard in my day. So the numbers, this is my disclaimer, yeah, okay, I did the math, so it's pretty basic. I looked at 10 years of avalanche accidents in the Northwest, asked 5 to 8 questions: who got CPR, who survived, who got caught in a burial, and came up with these results. And again, they're just localized Northwest accidents in Washington and Oregon. And again, I have to apologize in the back, there's some quotes from some of the accidents. As I was gleaning through the material of all 10 years, which is a lot, you guys do a good job. There's a lot of writing in there. So like this one, it says, in the blink of an eye, I find myself partially wrapped around a tree, skis uphill, and buried up to my shoulders. And so you'll see some of these quotes, and hopefully there's motivational for you guys to add a little bit more level of margin of safety in your backcountry touring. I counted 158 people involved in avalanche accidents in the last 10 years. Now, I took a little liberties with the definition of non-critical burials. I counted 86. And the liberties I took, anytime your feet moved and you started slipping downhill, that doesn't, and I counted that as a non-critical burial. If you ended up on top of the debris pile and he's like, whoa, I counted you as a non-critical burial. Or if you got buried up to your chest, I counted you in. So there's 86 of those over the last 10 years. There is 72 critical burials, which your face is emerged, your airway is obstructed over the last 10 years. Fatalities are 45 in between Oregon and Washington. Injuries, if you came out with a twisted ankle, or you got a little bit of a concussion, or you had a broken pelvis or a femur or a broken arm, I counted you as an injury. There's 57. So I'm just looking at potential. Once your feet start moving downhill, That's what I was trying to recognize. What are the things that's going to happen to you once you get caught in an avalanche? And there's 56 people that were caught in slides and were not injured. Even a small amount of snow is extremely powerful. We had causes of death. There's 30 trauma deaths. 13 deaths were associated with asphyxia. There are 2 deaths over the last 10 years that were associated with trauma and asphyxia. Again, my disclaimer again is that I'm just reading this data and gleaning from the reports of what these causes were. Some had reports from the coroner's office of causes of death, and some were just ancillary or reports third or second hand. But I still think the numbers are pretty close. 14 of those people received CPR. Again, here's a little liberties I took again with this number, and I counted all the burial times people estimated they were being buried. One person said, yep, the guy was buried in 3.5 minutes. I don't know where you come out with the 30 seconds, but a total of burial time, and I stopped at an hour. If you were buried more than an hour, I didn't count you in this, but there's 814.5 minutes of people buried over the last 10 years. And had some fun with this math. I just took all the critical burials, divided that, and came up with the average burial time was about 5.1 minutes. That was just some fun math I was doing. But again, if I looked at the narratives, I did find that 5 to 7 minutes seems to be in those critical burials where these folks were recovered. Anything past that, your outcomes weren't that great. So 73 of the 158 victims documented in my study had documented beacon, probe, and shovel. And between 2008 and 2018, 19 victims wore airbags. 8 were deployed and survived. 4 deaths were associated with, 4 deaths had airbags, and 4 of those were deployed, and they still did not survive, or they were not properly worn. And that, to me, is a scary trend. And I do see this when I'm out personally in the mountains. I see a lot of airbags not properly worn, jackets open, beacons out, even in avalanche terrain, and that's not going to do you any good unless you wear that properly when you have to activate it. 4 wore the ABS and did not deploy the airbag and sustained only injuries. Some were severe and some were minor. And where there's 13 solo deaths over the 10 years. So, like I was talking earlier, if your feet start moving, you're going, oh, I think I got caught in an avalanche. What's your chance of what's going to happen to you? Calculated 48% of being killed or hurt is your chances. 20% is a chance of dying in an avalanche in the Northwest. And remember that those factors in the Northwest, in our unique terrain, there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of boulders to hit as you're sliding down. If you do read those accident reports, I do encourage it because there's a lot of good information to glean, some good studying. And it's pretty gruesome when you get tore through a stand of trees. So that's very important to recognize. 36% chance of being injured, and if you're skiing solo, just by those 13 solo deaths, you have a 50% chance of being killed if you're out there by yourself. So hopefully those numbers are kind of sobering. As I was crunching the numbers, added it up, that did kind of change my outlook a little bit better. I think I'm going to be wearing my airbag a little bit tighter. My helmet's going to be cinched down a little bit better, and it definitely is going to affect my personal decision making. And hopefully I can relay that on to my students. So how do we make this chain of survival stronger? How do we forge that link better? So over the past 2 seasons, I experimented with it in a curriculum. And it would be great to have every person recreational go out and take a woofer or wilderness first aid or whatever there is and dedicate that time, but that's a lot of time. But again, my message today is that we just focus on immediate life-saving care in the backcountry. And so what I suggest to do, and as professionals, could you incorporate this in your guys' curriculum? The American Heart Association, again, that's my disclaimer, I don't work for them, I'm not trying to promote a product, but they do have an online course. I had some students take this online basic first aid course. They can do it at home at their leisure, pre-season. They showed up in an avalanche curriculum rescue course that I had. With their certificate in hand, yes, I completed. I do have a fundamental knowledge in this. And then we did all the hands-on skill sessions in the field and practice doing compressions on mannequins in the snow in an austere environment. And I feel like that I really got some good feedback back there. We did that at VertFest 2 seasons ago, as this picture shows, and some super feedback. So again, let's teach them rapid avalanche rescue, which again is super important. Definitely, we got to find that victim, get them out of the snow, and open their airway and get them. But now what? You may be stuck there for the next 20 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours. You are that immediate lifesaver. It's not the ski patrol. It's not these other great resources that are out there, but you are there. You're that witness to that, like I was talking about the cardiac arrest earlier. So let's teach them basic medical care and shelter and evacuation techniques. And again, does that increase potential victim survival? I think it does. Because if you teach them the steps early on, teach them methodically to learn the steps, they will execute it as one in a rescue. You want that to happen instinctively and fast and somewhat comfortably. They know what they do, and give them confidence, which these courses, I hope, would do if we decide to do, as an industry, decide to do it. So it was hard for me to gauge in the rain if these students were having fun, but my ultimate question was, does practicing to locate, excavate, resuscitate, and evacuate, the 4 8s, a victim in an austere, safe environment, does that affect your decision-making prior to traveling in avalanche terrain? And everybody in the course said yes. So that made me feel good, a positive thing, that if we do, as an industry, or somehow as a professionals in this room, add more of a medical component, more formalized, more educational process, it will affect ultimately their decision-making before they leave the home. The other part I would like to suggest, and how many people are here today, Scott, do you think? Sure. 504. Okay, there's 504 people in this room. That's an army of rescuers, right? At some point today, shake somebody's hand that you don't know. I'm not going to make you do what my old Baptist pastor did when I was a kid. We all stand up every Sunday morning, turn around, shake, introduce, right? But get to know everybody in this room, because that probe may hit you someday, and that's that guy that's going to save your life. So how would we mobilize this room, this army of backcountry skiers, snowmobilers, all us recreational users and professionals to save you or a person that's been caught in an avalanche? I'd like to show a quick video, and it might be a bit loud at first, and I apologize. But this is a software that the city of Seattle, I understand, uses. And when you see this very short video PSA clip, picture this not in the urban environment, but picture this in the wilderness or in the mountains. Hopefully this works. One. So Pulse Point is a software that pings the nearest cell phone to a cardiac arrest in an urban environment. And that person who is signed up to that service can rush to that person's house or the street corner where that cardiac arrest has been called to and initiate citizen CPR. So why couldn't we have a similar technology in the wilderness? How many people have been in a valley skiing or in some drainage, and the next drainage over there's a rescue, and you get home, you turn the news on, you're like, hey, I was touring there the other day, or yeah. Well, multiple burials seem to be happening a lot when I looked at this data. And so a lot of these people the companions were buried waist deep. They had to self-extricate themselves before they get out to get their victim. Why couldn't we not alert us backcountry users that, hey, next drainage over, next tree stand over, there's someone that's buried? That can be done through a 911 system or a search and rescue organization. But let's use that technology. And To my knowledge, to this day, there is none out there. We can hit somebody's spot device or their cell phone. I understand the spotty cell phone coverage thing, but I think that would be the next thing, because we need to mobilize this army of rescuers that are potential rescuers. So another suggestion I would like to propose to this to our group is measure the results. Can we look at in the accident reports or gather data for who's received CPR, who has survived, what the causes of death are, which we have been starting to include those lately in the accident reports, but let's see if we can get more of those. The injured, the type of injuries and the severity, and where the companion's trained in CPR first aid. So if we do implement something like that, at least we have a measuring stick that we can see our results and see our effectiveness. So these are some of my own reflections here. Again, these are just my own, just reading the accident reports and doing a little armchair quarterbacking that I've been able to do in the last 36 years of looking at accidents in the urban setting. Definitely wear a helmet. How many people wear helmets when they're actually, okay. Yeah, that's my, I was spotty on that personally, but probably unless I'm skiing in the parking lot, which I probably should wear a helmet in there, I'll be wearing my helmet. Properly wear your ABS and practice with that. That is very important. I have all my staff members and my crew members, we practice with our ABS all the time. Multiple burials seem to occur often, so have a higher index of suspicion when you're dealing with an injury. If it looks minor to you at that point, assume that it's probably worse than it is. I'm going to be more vigilant of my companion's safety equipment. Hey, zip up that jacket. Let's wear your ABS bag a little bit better. Expect a long rescue. Search and dig fast. Get to the airway and head exposed as fast as you can. That seemed to be an underlying theme in all the accident reports. And this is for the professionals out in the room, whether you're a guide, search and rescue, whoever. But I really think we're due, it's not if, but when, for the mass victim slide. There's been a couple reports in the 10 years, like on Rainier, Snow Lake area, things like that. And I'm just going to read Jeremy Allen's quote. The continued almost daily use of Snow Lake Summer Trail during the winter months, especially during periods of elevated avalanche danger, continues to be alarming. And yeah, that weighs heavy on my mind, that we're just due for a multi-victim burial. So in conclusion, we talked about the chain of survival. Again, the recreational user, early notification of an issue, organized rescue, and hospital. But I want to change that to a pyramid, because I really think that you as recreational users and professionals in this room are the foundation for good, positive outcomes. And I think that's where our focus should be, is let's get this recreational army of rescuers better trained and hopefully increase survivability in the backcountry. Thank you.